We all know that Keanu Reeves is a kind-hearted person. He always shows compassion, whether in his actions, words, or the way he treats others with respect and humility. His generosity and genuine care for people, animals, and those in need have made him not just a beloved actor, but a true inspiration to many. This is what happened this time. In this story, Keanu Reeves had always found peace in solitude, in the simple moments of life that so often went unnoticed. A quiet evening walk through the old neighborhood was his way of unwinding, allowing his mind to drift while his feet carried him along the winding sidewalks. The sun had begun its slow descent, bathing the world in a golden hue, while the first hints of night stretched their fingers across the sky. The sound of distant laughter echoed down the street, sharp, jarring, and cruel. It cut through the calm like a splinter under the skin. Something about the laughter unsettled him. It wasn't the carefree joy of children at play. It carried a different weight, mockery, amusement at someone else's expense. Keanu slowed his steps, listening. The laughter came from behind an old wooden fence, half-rotted and leaning under the weight of time. Through a gap in the boards, he caught sight of movement, a group of older boys standing in a loose circle, their shoulders shaking with laughter. At the center of it all was a small, scruffy dog, ears flattened, its thin body pressed against the dirt as it tried to escape their taunts. But it wasn't alone. A little girl, no older than 8, stood protectively in front of the frightened animal, her arms spread wide, blocking the boy's access. Her small frame trembled, but her voice was strong. "Stop it. Leave him alone. He didn't do anything to you." Keanu's breath steadied, his usual calm shifting into quiet resolve. He knew cruelty when he saw it, and he knew the power of fear. But what struck him most was not the boys. It was the girl. She stood her ground, outnumbered and overpowered but unwilling to move. That was courage. And he couldn't just walk away. The girl's hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her stance wide, shielding the dog from the boys. Her bright eyes, filled with fear and determination, darted between them, silently begging them to stop. But they only smirked. The ringleader, a boy with a cocky grin and a careless slouch, crossed his arms. "It's just a stupid stray," he said, kicking a small rock toward the dog. "What do you care?" "I care because he's scared," she shot back. "You're hurting him for no reason." Keanu could see it. Her lips trembled, but she didn't move. The dog, a thin and shivering mutt, cowered behind her legs, its ribs visible beneath its matted fur. It had clearly known hunger, maybe even past cruelty. Yet it had found something to believe in. Her. The ringleader scoffed, rolling his eyes. "What are you gonna do about it?" One of the boys laughed. "Yeah, are you gonna fight us?" The group took a step forward, and for the first time, the girl hesitated. Keanu felt a deep, unshakable certainty settle in his chest. He had seen this before, people abusing their strength, mistaking it for power. He knew what had to be done. His boots crunched against the gravel as he stepped into the yard. The sound was soft, but enough to break the moment. The boys turned, startled, and as their eyes met his, something changed. Keanu Reeves was known for his kindness, for his quiet and humble nature. But there was something about his presence, a steady, unshakable force that made them uneasy. The laughter died immediately. The boys exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence faltering. Keanu wasn't towering over them, wasn't yelling or making any aggressive movements. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes calm but unwavering, and yet that stillness was more powerful than any threat. He let the silence stretch before speaking. "Do you really think this makes you strong?" His voice was quiet, but each word carried weight. The ringleader frowned. "What?" Keanu gestured toward the trembling dog and the little girl. "Bullying. Hurting something weaker than you. Does it make you feel powerful?" The boys shifted uncomfortably. "I'll tell you what real strength is," Keanu continued. "It's standing up for others. It's knowing you have the power to hurt someone, but choosing not to. It's protecting the ones who can't protect themselves." The words settled over them like a heavy fog. The ringleader's jaw tightened, but something in his eyes flickered. Uncertainty, maybe even shame. He glanced at his friends looking for support, but one by one they averted their eyes. The bravado was fading. Finally, one of the boys mumbled, "Come on, let's just go." The leader hesitated before scoffing, kicking a loose rock. "Whatever." Without another word, he turned and walked away. The others followed, their footsteps fading into the dusk. Keanu watched them go before turning to the girl. She was still standing firm, as if waiting for the next attack. The little girl's shoulders sagged as the last of the boys disappeared down the street. The tension that had gripped her so tightly was finally slipping away, leaving behind only exhaustion and relief. She turned to Keanu, her big, expressive eyes filled with gratitude. For a moment, she just stared at him, as if trying to understand why he had stepped in. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but sincere. Keanu crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "You did the hard part," he said with a soft smile. "Standing up to them. That takes real courage." She blinked up at him, surprised. "I was scared." "Bravery isn't about not being scared," Keanu said gently. "It's about doing the right thing, even when you are." She let that sink in, then looked down at the scruffy dog still cowering at her feet. The poor thing trembled, his tail tucked so tightly between his legs that it was nearly invisible. His ribs were painfully visible beneath his dirty fur, and his eyes darted back and forth, still expecting another attack. Keanu slowly extended his hand, palm up, allowing the dog to come to him. For a moment, the dog hesitated, torn between fear and a deep instinctual longing for kindness. Then, cautiously, he sniffed Keanu's fingers before pressing his damp nose against them. Keanu let him take his time, not rushing, just offering reassurance through steady presence. "What's his name?" Keanu asked. The girl hesitated. "I just call him Buddy." "Buddy's a great name," Keanu said warmly. "Has he been out here alone for long?" She nodded. "I think so. He's always here, hiding near the fences. I sneak him food when I can, but my mom says we can't have pets." She bit her lip, guilt flashing across her face. "I try my best, but—" Keanu saw it clearly. The way she loved this dog, how she had done everything she could with what little power she had. "You've done more for him than most people ever would," Keanu assured her. "He's lucky to have you." Buddy looked up at her then, as if he knew. She reached down and gently stroked his matted fur, her fingers shaking slightly. Keanu glanced around. The old yard was empty now, quiet except for the distant rumble of thunder on the horizon. The air smelled like rain. The dog had no home, no family. And yet, despite his fear, he had trusted this little girl, just like she had trusted him. A thought formed in Keanu's mind, something that felt so natural, so obvious, that he almost didn't need to say it out loud. Keanu took a deep breath before speaking. "Would it be okay if I took care of Buddy?" The little girl's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "You mean, you'd keep him?" "If that's all right with you," Keanu said gently, "I have the space, and I promise to take good care of him." She stared at him, a war waging behind her eyes. She wanted Buddy to be safe, to have a real home, but the thought of letting go, it was harder than she had expected. Her fingers curled into Buddy's fur. "I don't want him to be alone again." Keanu nodded. "He won't be. I promise." The girl swallowed hard, her small hands shaking. Then, slowly, she crouched down, pressing her forehead against Buddy's. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, for the first time since Keanu had seen him, Buddy relaxed. Just a little. "You're gonna have a home now," she whispered. "A real home." Buddy let out a quiet whimper as if he understood. She took a deep breath and pulled back, looking at Keanu with an intensity beyond her years. "Just promise me you'll love him." Keanu placed a hand over his heart. "With all my heart." She nodded, blinking quickly to keep the tears at bay. Then, with the kind of strength only a child can have, she gave Buddy one last stroke and took a step back. Keanu carefully scooped the dog into his arms. Buddy stiffened at first, his muscles coiled with instinctive fear. But as Keanu held him, as the warmth of his steady heartbeat reached the trembling creature, Buddy slowly began to relax. The wind picked up, carrying the distant scent of rain. The sky had darkened further, heavy with the promise of an approaching storm. "Goodbye, Buddy," the girl whispered. Keanu gave her a small, solemn nod before turning toward the street. As he walked away, Buddy in his arms, he didn't look back. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew she needed this moment. She needed to watch Buddy leave, to know he was safe, to let go in her own way. The first raindrop fell just as Keanu reached the sidewalk. It was light, cool against his skin, a gentle prelude to the coming storm. He could hear the little girl behind him, still standing in the yard, watching, her heart full of both sorrow and relief. Buddy shifted slightly in his arms, his small body still uncertain, but no longer trembling. Keanu adjusted his grip, cradling him as though he had always been there, as though this dog had always been meant to be a part of his life. "You're safe now," Keanu murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Buddy let out a soft sigh as if, for the first time in his life, he truly believed it. The rain began to fall in earnest as Keanu walked home. Thunder rumbled, deep and distant, but there was a warmth inside him that no storm could touch. He had saved lives on the big screen, had played heroes in front of millions. But this was real. This was what being a hero truly meant. As he neared his house, Keanu thought of all the moments that had led him here, the cruel laughter that had drawn him in, the fearless little girl who had stood her ground, the shaking, starving dog who had known nothing but fear until today. A small smile touched his lips. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a new beginning. And as the storm raged on outside, Keanu and Buddy stepped into the warmth of a home filled with quiet kindness, a place where neither of them would ever have to be alone again.